Colorado. You guys have been fucking amazing for the last 10 years.
Let me start off with a Twitch feed this morning, and I got to get the whole name right. Mile High Hockey.
We have more flexibility, we have more depth, we have more guys pulling the rope in the right direction, so starting to see some success.
It's a special year, and I think our guys deserve to have the chips pushed all in.
It was nice when our management goes all in and it puts pressure on our team, and we like pressure.
Winning's tough, and if you think you have a group that could possibly do it, you go all in.
Welcome to the Mile High Hockey Lab.
Oh boy, I got the chills from that intro. I don't know about you guys. Welcome to the Mile High Hockey Lab. It's that time of the year where we put a bow on the regular season for the Colorado Avalanche, and we start talking about playoff madness. Oh, what a wonderful time. My heart's racing right now, mostly because we are live and coming to you on YouTube and Twitch and all that fun stuff. So if you are on X watching, please go give us a follow at MHH_lab and at Mile High Hockey. I'm here today with my friends Evan, Ezra, and Jackie. Let's talk about what happened and what might happen for the Colorado Avalanche versus the Winnipeg Jets in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We also have one game to play against the Edmonton Oilers tomorrow. We'll talk about that a little bit. And yep, it's just playoff preview time. Evan, let's go to you first. We sort of talked about the show beforehand, and you said, I need to talk about that Jets game. Just, you have the floor.
Man, that Jets game on Saturday, the 7-0, just absolute drubbing by at the hands of the Jets was just straight up awful. Like, I don't really know how else to really say it, right? And while I think the most concerning thing from that game is not that they lost 7-0, I think it's more so that they've lost another big game for the second time in a week, to pretty much put the bow on where they finish in the standings this year, right? So they lost out on last Sunday against the Dallas Stars to lose out on maybe winning the Central Division. And then they lose out 7-0 at home to the Winnipeg Jets, who now they're facing in the playoffs and lost home ice advantage now, right? So the playoffs are going to start on the road. So I think that is very, very concerning that the Avs haven't showed up in two of the biggest games of the year, right? While they just showed up against Minnesota in the game between those games, it's far from ideal. Well, Nathan McKinnon did, at least with his hat trick. We'll say that. But man, I just think that's really disheartening going into a playoff run, and just kind of ultimately put a bow on what was kind of a big collapse from being a favorite to win the Central Division and being contenders for the Cup to now not even having home ice in the first round. And people are comparing it to, it's 2022. The Avs were really bad going in there. They already had clinched the division and the Western Conference in March. Oof. So they were resting players at that point. That's why they lost, I think it was 6 of their last 7 games. That was a very, very different scenario than what this is right now. And so people comparing it to that, I just don't see the correlation there. So just wanted to get that off of my chest, shut that one down. Because it has not been a good time in Avs land right now. So here's to the playoffs, maybe turning that around, or just making my stress and anxiety even worse.
Yeah, dude, that's drubbing is the best way to put it. That's exactly what it was. And it wasn't like the Avalanche really had much to say. That it just kept on getting poured on. You know, my dad and my nephew went to the game and they were super excited, and then they left and they said that might have been the least fun Avalanche game ever. It was still fun, but that might have been the least fun one I've ever been to. And I'm with you, Evan. I totally agree about like the context being totally different between 2022 and now. Like you mentioned, they had some stuff already in the bag. I was listening to the satellite radio today, and they were talking about team grades, and I thought about, and they were putting it in the eye of expectation. and how would you grade a team between A and F, like school? And I was thinking about that for the Avalanche, and I don't think I would necessarily give them a passing grade based on the expectation coming in, which, like you mentioned, Evan, was to win the division. But I'll let Ezra or Jackie kind of take it from here.
Well, I had the fortunate pleasure of being at that game as well. So, and that was the only game that I brought my husband to. So, needless to say, he wasn't all that impressed. But I think it kind of is an interesting contrast to the Vegas game because they lost that game in a different manner. And it's sort of that question, is it worse just to get completely blown out? Or is it worse to have a lead and then completely collapse? So it's like the Avs gave us the pleasure of both, all in the span of like 20 hours.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up that Vegas game too. I guess we could talk about that too. Is just like that. First off, that the first, I would say, first period in particular, great response after going down 2-0, or after going down to, what was it, 4-0 to the Jets in that same 20-minute span 24 hours earlier, right? Great response, wonderful response. And the Avs, I want to say they lost their legs on the second leg of this back-to-back, but I don't even know if you'd say that even, right? Because pretty much in the last, I would say, 25 minutes of that game, Vegas was just all over the Avs, and they're just hanging on for dear life, right? And Josh Manson, man, those penalties, penalties as a whole just kind of been killer the last, I'd argue, 2 weeks for the Avs, right? Just penalty after penalty, just giving up, just leaking power play goals too. That does not help their case either, going into the playoffs. So lots that needs to be worked on for sure before the playoffs start up next week, and we'll see how they respond.
I do feel like I agree with you, Evan, that it's not comparable to 2022, but in a way that they're not as engaged. Like, these games they lost did matter. It would have helped them, but they still weren't playoff games. And I think they've sort of been a bit disengaged for a while. And I think that is the part that you're going to see better once the puck drops on game one. It's just, I'm not sure that there's a switch for their defensive issues this year. I think as much as they'd like to say that they've fixed and improved on them, that's probably what I'm the most concerned about. But I do think that they're going to give more of like an engaged, competitive, dialed in effort. And so I think you can draw a little bit of parallels from there, but I don't think you can just write it off and be like, hey, they won the cup after sucking, so no worries.
Well, yeah. FU 2006, awesome username, says they need to be more disciplined. And I think, Evan, you mentioned Josh Manson, like the high stick late in that game against Vegas was just kind of, what in the world are you really even attempting to do there? Like, it didn't make any sense. You see high sticks in kind of the flow of the game. That was really not. So it just, I agree with you. They need to be more disciplined. And Jackie, I'm trying so hard not to totally agree with you about the Avs defensive problems. The only way I'm able to cope right now before the madness is I think that some of Avs problems will be not solved, but at least alleviated to an extent by the style of playoff hockey. I think, like, I look at Josh Manson in particular as somebody who probably plays better inside the style of playoff hockey, which is that elevated effort that you mentioned earlier, and kind of like the tighter ice, not as many open breaks. I think that will suit both he and Georgiev. So that's my silver lining, I guess, right now. I don't know how you all feel about that, but that's kind of where I'm at.
I mean, we've talked about that too, right? About how Manson elevates his play in the playoffs. They really missed him last year. Same with Nichushkin, right? The entire kind of second line as a whole has just kind of been, well, really, I guess outside of everyone that is not Nathan McKinnon and the first line has just kind of not been there, the last week and a half or so. So, you have to hope that this discipline, right? This discipline and this elevated style of play, right, rears its head, by the time the playoffs start next week, right? And it is no easy task when you're doing it without home ice advantage, right? And we've seen how the Avs playoff record is on the road, or we've seen how the record is on the road, rather, especially this year in particular. So if you want to win this series, you have to get at least one game in Winnipeg, and that's honestly going to be a tough order, I think. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, you're talking about the second line forwards for the Avalanche, but you recently wrote an article on our website, milehighhockey.com, about the Winnipeg forwards. What can you tell me just off the top of your head that really stuck out to you when you did the deep dive for that article?
Yeah, so it went up, I believe it was Monday. Monday, going over our playoff previews, and we're going to have a whole bunch of that coming up here, leading up to the start of the playoff series with the Jets. So be sure to go check all of that out, what we have to offer there. But when you look back at the Jets forwards in particular, one, it helps that they just played on Saturday and put a beating on the Avs, and two, it kind of looks pretty similar to what we saw last year with the Seattle Kraken. So much so that I actually made a spelling error and said Seattle Kraken projected forwards and not Winnipeg Jets projected forwards at first. So thank you. I forget, somebody emailed me that. So thank you for calling me out on
That's
that.
amazing.
Because yeah, that's how similar they are, right? There is no like superstar player that the Jets have. There is no comparable to like Nathan McKinnon or Mikko Rantanen, I would say. They just have a really good depth team that can score up and down the lineup, right? Adam Lowry scored 2 goals against the Avs as a third line center, and that's where he's going to be. The Avs fans might know this name, Vladislav Nemestikov, played with the Avs in 2020. He's having a career high in points centering the fourth line. Gabriel Velarde has been a very underrated player all year with Winnipeg, playing up there on that first line. I believe he scored as well on Saturday against the Avs.
Yes, he did.
So
I really like Velarde, so yeah, I keep an eye on him.
Yeah, so basically, it's going to be very, very similar to what we saw against Seattle. The Winnipeg forwards are going to be a team that matches up really, really well against the Avs' depth in particular, right? And it's not going to be the same without Landeskog, without O'Connor, without maybe even Kovalenko. Well, then again, we don't even really know what he looks like. So it's going to be very, very grindy. And that's probably not very good for Avs fans to hear, considering what we saw last year, right? Knowing how that ended. So you have to hope that Nathan McKinnon is an absolute god and leads this team and beats everybody in his sight, or that the Avs depth shows up and at least helps him out a little bit along the way as well. So I kind of gave it a 50-50 toss-up between the Avs forwards and the Jets forwards, and we're just really going to have to see who in the Avs depth shows up to go up against that very depth-filled Winnipeg forwards line.
Yeah, I feel like you're right about the 50-50, but I'll let Evan or Ezra and Jackie kind of give their 2 cents. I will say I like that you put the extra forwards, which are Nino Niederreiter, Rasmus Kupari, and Cole Perfetti, because as we always know, things happen in the playoffs. Guys start falling out of the lineup, so it's good to know who those guys are for Winnipeg. As we know, Kovalenko, Malinsky, and there's kind of a few of those guys for the Avalanche as well, waiting in the wings should things hit the fan in that regard. You brought up Nemesnikov, who almost was an Avalanche legend, if not for Yoel Kiviranta. So you just had to hurt me with that one. But Ezra, what are your thoughts on Evan's article about the forwards? Did anything stick out to you?
Yeah, great article. Good job, Evan. That's number one. But also I think the depth is really the question mark for Colorado, and you outlined how strong they are for Winnipeg. But I really think, going back to Adrian's point earlier about the change of style in the playoffs, I think it's kind of going to unlock guys like Ross Colton and Brandon Duhaime in particular, Miles Wood too, who kind of have to rein themselves in a little bit. They can't be we saw what happens when Colton gets a little too wild. He knocks Gerard out. So, I think he's going to be free to be himself in the playoffs, and Wood and Duhaime as well. It's possible that the Avs depth steps up in a way that counteracts some of that advantage that Winnipeg undeniably has. But you look at you just listed off 3 players as Winnipeg's extra forwards. I'm like, yeah, that would be a third line here. That'd be great. So it is definitely going to be a challenge. But then the top end of the lineup, like you said, is so skewed heavily in Colorado's favor that I think that matters more. And I'm excited to see Nathan McKinnon skate circles around Brendan Dillon and the rest of the slow Winnipeg defenders that I'm sure we'll get to in a minute.
Yes. Well, and I think you're right. That's why I wrote in our roundtable, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, that the Avs will benefit from the stylistic change. And I think you're right about those particular people as well. And to kind of go more over on that, I have a hard time believing that the moves the Avs made at the deadline and in the offseason weren't in almost direct reaction to how they were beaten against the Kraken, because the team last year, although injury riddled, still had the big guys. And I think like what we missed was the depth, even though, it was for a different reason. The big guys kind of were out there on their own in a stylistic that doesn't necessarily suit our playmakers all that well. We saw Nathan McKinnon, they low hide him and basically shut him down for the entire series, and as much as you can, Nathan McKinnon. So, I mean, there's going to be a focus on him throughout the series as well. But Jackie, what are your thoughts on the forward group for the Jets?
Pretty much what you guys said. It is good depth. They don't have elite forwards, but I mean, Kyle Connor is pretty darn good, and so is Ehlers. And I think if Velarde had played more of a full season, his point totals would have been more outwardly impressive. Like, I really like him. I think when the Jets had their little dip, what was it, about a month ago or something, and they couldn't win, well, he was out of the lineup. So could be related there. And you mentioned Perfetti. He's a young player, and I think every championship team needs that youth spark talent, and that's one of my concerns. The Avs don't have that because they got rid of all the young players. And you see like Dallas, I mean, if we end up playing them, I mean, I think that's going to make a huge difference if they're there in the second round. And so I think Perfetti's like someone that the Jets needed. You need a little bit of that in the lineup. And so those are 2 of the guys I'm keying in on, but I think it's funny. Aya follows on their 4th line. I know Avs fans are dying for him. So yeah, it's going to be a tough group to contain across the board. So the Avs are going to need someone down the lineup to step up, and they're also going to need their stars to shine. I mean, that just kind of is what makes this team go. Like, depth scoring is always nice, but you need those big guns to show up big time.
Yeah, and that'll be huge for, if McKinnon wins the Hart and doesn't have like a really stellar playoff performance, it's going to make a lot of Tampa Bay Lightning fans really happy. And that's like one of the things I'm really not about doing right now.
If he wins it, I don't care who's mad.
I mean, I won't care. I know I can already see the tweets from the group over there in Florida. So
we'll have something to say on that when we get to the round table.
I was going to say, I think the Panthers might get farther than the Lightning, but hey, who am I? Anyway, let's move on to the defenders, which was the article that I wrote. Basically totally stole Ezra's template from last season because it was so good. So kudos to you, Ezra. And went ahead and went with the Winnipeg Jets. I had Josh Morrissey with Dylan DeMello, with Brendan Dillon with Neil Pionk, Dylan Sandberg with Nate Schmidt, or possibly Colin Miller. Evan, initial reactions to that group there?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, Nathan McKinnon is in a skate circles around them, right? I will point out though, Josh Morrissey, he's been very, very good this year, very underrated. If it weren't for Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar being the 2 players that they are, I think he could definitely be in the conversation for one of the best defenders in the league for sure. He's definitely overshadowed 100%. So definitely look for him to make an impact. I believe he also scored against the Avs last week. And that's what he does. He provides a lot of scoring, but then also a lot of defensive structure. That's why he's there on that first pairing, right? But outside of that, when you look at the bottom, I guess 4 there technically, Sam Girard, Josh Manson, I think that they'll pair up well against them as well. And then you have the veteran Jack Johnson, of course, as well, and Sean Walker, who's kind of come into his own the last little while as well. I just think the key thing to watch there for the defenders, and I already kind of touched on it, is watch out for those penalties, right?
Mhm.
Josh Manson has taken some not good ones as of late. Same goes for Sean Walker, right? So you really, really have to be careful about that. And I would be a little bit concerned about defensive depth as well, especially say if Sam Girard is not able to go to start the playoffs, right? He's still in concussion protocol right now. And that's something that needs to be concerned about, right? So if he's not able to go, then you have guys like Caleb Jones, Sam Malinsky, but he's also injured right now. And then who do you even have after that? Brad Hunt. Like, that's not really ideal for what you want going into
the man with few teeth.
So yeah, right. So we'll have to see how. Most importantly, Sam Girard's health. I think that's going to be really key going into this playoff series. Seeing if he is ready to go. And if he's not ready to go, then how will Caleb Jones do coming in? Will Sam Malinsky be okay and recover in time to maybe be with the Avs in their playoff run instead of the Eagles' playoff run? It's going to be an interesting dynamic at least. But I do like the star power of the Avs defenders more than the Jets.
Well, Jackie, you said that the Avs might need some youth. Like every Cup team has a little bit of youth. And although Brad Hunt's not young, he's young at heart. So maybe he brings it in and just kind of...
No, he's 35 years old now. No.
As I said, young at heart. I mean, come on. He's a fun guy. But Jackie, I feel like you've kind of, on the way out of this season, talked a lot about feeling like the Avalanche gave away their competitive advantage on the back end. Do you feel like that's true in this matchup in particular?
I mean, it's going to be true forever. So, I mean, yeah. And it is true if you think about having Girard out of the lineup, it started getting rough quickly. So, every playoff team is going to hurt if they lose a main part of their roster. So, it is a war of attrition, and there's some luck involved in there. But even though I do think Girard probably will be ready game one, it is a concern because it drops off so quickly. Like, it might be okay if everyone's healthy, but if they have trouble moving the puck, I mean, that's what they do. That's what their whole strategy is based off of. And so, no, I still don't think that was a great idea to chip away at it and undermine their competitive advantage, and we'll see how it holds up.
Well, that leads me to my question for Ezra, because a big key for me once I did kind of look into this matchup on the back end is going to be that second line and how they perform against Winnipeg's second pairing, which features Neil Pionk, which is like, if you're a Winnipeg fan right now, apparently he's not your favorite guy. And they feel like the left is pretty much settled, but the right side of their defense, especially on the second and third pairing, are kind of their, I guess, Achilles heel, so to speak. So it's going to be a big deal for, that second line, which kind of looks like it might be a variation of Lehkonen, Middlestat, and Nichushkin, swapping in a couple guys. Ezra, what are your thoughts on that, I guess, sentiment for Neil Pionk? And do you also see that as kind of like something that might get exploited in this series?
That's wild to me because of the not Josh Morrissey defenders on that roster. The only one I'd give like a moment's thought to bringing to Colorado is Neil Pionk. He's the only one who can move a puck. The rest of them are just big towers. I mean, it's their defense is designed to work with Connor Hellebuck, so it makes sense. Like, all they have to do is keep his vision open and he will stop everything. But man, it's not going to matter if they can't keep up with Colorado. And obviously they've done well in the regular season, and the playoffs tend to be a time when bigger guys get a little bit more leeway with what they're doing in terms of penalties, and they kind of are more effective. So it'll be really interesting to see that. But it's hard for me to look at that defense and be worried about them really at all. I think Casey Middlestat's going to have more time and space than he's had to make some plays. I still think he can be really effective. Obviously, the Byram side of that conversation is a big loss. But Middlestad himself, I'm a big fan of. I think with more time in the system, which he's gotten through the course of this rest of this regular season after he was acquired, he can only get better. And having either Rantanen or Chushkin on one side and Lehkonen on the other is a big difference than playing between Brandon Duhaime and Lehkonen. So
Yeah.
I think, which he did for most of that time because of various injuries. So I think there's a chance for him to really show that he is going to be able to be a difference maker. And if he doesn't, it's going to make it a lot harder to win, because chewing up those lower pairing defenders is the way that this series goes Colorado's way.
Yeah, you're hoping that the first line catches that second pairing on, and it starts that trickle down of bad matchups for the rest of the group on the bottom six and the middle six in particular. So as we saw in the playoffs when the Avalanche have had success, we usually get a couple of clutch goals from a guy like JT Compher or Logan O'Connor, sprinkled in with dynamic performances from dudes like Kyle McCarr, Mikko Rantanen, and Nathan MacKinnon. So I think that's kind of the recipe for the Avalanche, mitigating, self-inflicted wounds and, just kind of playing their style of hockey, whether it, win or lose, that's just how it is. But at least go out not shooting yourself in the foot, I think is the biggest thing for the Avalanche in this postseason. But let's get to the goaltenders, which I believe is our article. It hasn't dropped yet. Jackie, when does the goaltenders article come out?
I believe it's scheduled for Friday. So
okay, so
we have a game to get through tomorrow.
Gotcha.
And then
okay.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what you've learned about this goaltender matchup so far.
Well, this is definitely one that everyone's pretty familiar with. We all know that Connor Hellebuyck is, if the Jets don't have an elite forward, they have an elite goaltender. That's where their elite player is. He's won the Vezina once already, finalist twice, probably will be a finalist and the winner this year. So that's a big task for the Avs. They're going to have to beat him. And their backup, I think you say his name, Brissot. Never said his name before, so sorry. He's been surprisingly solid too. Like, he's put up really good numbers, even though I highly, highly doubt we see him unless there's a catastrophe. And then, we know on the Avs side, the big question is Georgiev. Which one are we going to see? Is he going to bounce back? Is he going to be Forgiev again? Which is going to make it really tough against a good defensive team with an elite goaltender. And then Annanen's also sort of the wild card. I really don't think the Avs are they really going to hinge this season on what Annanen can give them? It'll be very interesting to see where the line is for Bednar, because I think the company line is he's the starter. They believe in him. On the radio today, they asked Bednar who's going to start, if he knows who's going to start game one. He said yes. And then they said, well, can you let us know who that is? I mean, come on. We all know who that is. You don't need to ask him this. We're not being coy here. Like, unless Georgiev trips walking out of his house and hurts himself, he's playing game one. And where we go from there,
Our was pretty good for the Eagles yesterday.
Yeah. Well, Hellebuyck has 3 shutouts all-time versus the Avs. He's 13-7-4 all-time against the Avs. He's only given up more than 3 goals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in those 24 games. So it's tough sledding pretty much every time the Avs have played Connor Hellebuyck pretty much in his career.
But he didn't have a great series against Vegas last year. Now, was that more because they were a wild card team and they just snuck in? But he's not infallible, though. So I'd say there's the silver lining there, is that, he can be beaten. If the Avs beat the Jets, he can be beaten. And he's, a big part of their team, but I don't think insurmountable.
Yeah, the Avs did put 7 on him. 5 on him in February of 2023. So that was kind of their best performance. 7 against. So yeah, there's to me, I said this in our roundtable, which we'll talk about next, but it's going to be about shooting talent for the Avalanche, because Hellebuyck's going to be pretty square and he's going to be in the right position most of the time. We're going to have to see the Avalanche shooting talent pick some corners, and we're going to have to see their depth get those greasy goals where it's kind of on a rebound, loose puck sort of thing, like that deflection. That's how we're going to beat a good goaltender, which as it turns out, Philip Grubauer kind of turned out to be at least suited for the style that the Kraken were playing last year, and a decent goaltender in that regard. So I do hope, like I mentioned earlier, that the Avs have kind of adjusted, but I do worry about if they ever adjusted in net. Ezra, do you worry about the net minding right now for Colorado?
I mean, yeah, you have to. The way Georgiev has played lately has been, as soon as one thing goes wrong, he visibly breaks down and everything else goes in. I mean, we talked about the 7-0 Winnipeg game, and then the Vegas comeback win against Colorado this week, and both of them were like, as soon as something went wrong, it was an avalanche coming down on the wrong side, you know. And the team in front of him knows that, and you could see, particularly in the Vegas game, like once that first one went in, there was the one that got waved off, and everybody like, you know. Yeah. Okay, we avoided this bomb. Let's just play our game. They kept playing their game, and then another one went in. That one counted, and you could see everybody tighten up, and the tightening up didn't work, right? Because then you start playing on the back of your heels, and especially on the second half of a back-to-back, that's not a good recipe for success. And if Georgiev is going to be that guy who's that fragile, the team in front of him knows that, and they're going to be fragile too, and that's not going to work.
Yeah,
I'm really. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Jackie.
I was just going to say, I'm just really interested to see where the line is. Like, at what point does Annunen get in the game? What point does he start a game? You know, how far do they have to be down? Are the Avs going to completely go down with the ship?
Totally.
And I think that'll be interesting, because I think the fans' line is a lot sooner than Bednar's, but
you should have seen me watching the Winnipeg game. After the second goal went in, I was like, pull him! Like, what are you talking about? And, but I was watching it on delay because I wasn't there live, and I didn't watch the third period because I knew nothing good was coming. But sorry, Jackie, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I think Bednar's line is a lot further than the fans, but you know, I do think there is a line. So we'll see.
Well, honestly, if we get close to that line, there's probably not going to be time for Bednar to have to make a choice. It'll probably be something it's settled anyway, so he'll be safe in that regard. Like the Avs, well, you better start adding in the elimination game, and he's going to be like, no, I'm going to go with my best gun. If they lose, he can just say, well, we'll worry about it in the offseason, yada yada. But
yeah, I could totally see that too.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't think though. Here's my thing, and I wonder if you guys agree with me. If you don't, that's fine. Welcome to the club. But I feel like Georgiev's whole thing is mental right now. He's proven to be physically capable, and he can. I just wonder and hope that the playoff atmosphere can shake his cage in a good way, in a way where he's like, you know, like, dude, just get on with it. You know what I mean? Because I think at this point it can't get any worse than it potentially getting way worse in the playoffs. But even if it gets way worse in the playoffs, it's looking like he's the Avalanche goalie next year anyway. So it's like, dude,
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of that.
Okay,
but what you're saying gives me hope, though, Adrian, because I mean, like, I think what we saw in the Winnipeg and Vegas games was the team in front of him knowing he was going to collapse and reacting like, well, okay, to an extent, to whatever extent a professional hockey player can do this, kind of being like, all right, whatever, it's the regular season, let's just move on. Let's let it happen. But in the playoffs, that's not going to happen. The guys in front of him are going to tighten up. They're going to make things happen. And that gives me hope, because even if Georgiev can't get his head together, I think everyone in front of him is going to step up and make up for him to the best of their ability, which maybe in the regular season they were tired of doing. In the playoffs, any fatigue about that is going away, because there's only one, you know, you're getting your season ends if you don't step up. So
well, and I hate to always recall on the past, but it's like all we really have, I guess, in terms of analysis. But like Grubauer was by no means looked at as the goalie who was going to put on the performance he put on against the Avalanche ahead of round one last year. He was a sub 900 goalie with a post. Yeah, a +3 GAA. It looked like Seattle was kind of left holding the bill with him, which I don't know if that's necessarily the jury's out on that, but I will say he came to play against the Avalanche in that first round of the playoffs. So I'm just hopeful that, like, because it does seem so mental, that it's something that can change kind of overnight. And I know that's weird, but it kind of did change overnight for him into the negative, and it just kind of hasn't bounced back from that. So
well, that's the thing with confidence is it either builds, it continues to build on itself, or it goes the other direction. So I do think it's possible. I think if he has a great game one, either a shutout or, lots of saves, only 1 or 2 goals given up, whatever, and then keeps building on it. It is possible because, like you said, he has the ability, but it's really going to have to build on it itself. Like I think any up and down might be tough for him to really, just say, oh, hey, I had a good game one. I don't think it's going to work like that. I think he's going to have to be one of the best players to win this series, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm hoping he sees it as a clean slate, because once round one starts, the regular season is completely behind you. It's business time. It's about winning 16 games before everybody else. And I think that change in mindset could help Georgiev. But Evan, let's end with you, Mr. Managing Editor. Tell our 150 plus live viewers how you feel about the goaltending situation here in Colorado.
Yeah, I think you guys have kind of touched on most of the bases here. In my opinion, goaltending is what's going to decide this series, because we all know what Connor Hellebuck can do, right? Which Georgiev are we going to get, right? I think that's going to be a big question too. And I would also think that Avs fans would feel a little bit more comfortable with the goaltending situation if it wasn't Justus Annunen behind him. Yeah. And that's not a dig against Justus at all, because he's really great and good goaltender. He just doesn't have that playoff caliber experience. If it was Pavel Francouz that was healthy and still back there, I think we'd feel at least a little bit better about him going in there, because we know what he can do. We know what he's capable of. He started, all 4 games of the Western Conference Final. He is completely capable of that. Now, Justus Annunen is no Pavel Francouz, of course. Alexander Georgiev is kind of you are right. It is a very mental thing for him, and I'll end with this. I guess I'll say, because I'm a soccer goalie, so I'm very well used to hearing all of the heats about letting in all the goals and all that. Something I was always told from the very first time when I started this: the opposing team has to beat 10 players before they beat you, right? In hockey, it's the same way. You got the opposing team has to beat 5 players before they beat you, right? That's the nature of the draw. It's a team sport, right? So be it. But you still want your goalie to bail you out sometimes, right? And we have seen less and less of that from Alexander Georgiev than we have, in past games and past months even. So that's something that I think is also kind of infuriating with Avs fans, is that he's not making the saves, right? But it's not all his fault either. It's a whole team collective effort. And you were very right about it being a very mental game. And you need to be mentally kind of prepared for things, on top of things, all that sort of stuff. I would just be very concerned with that, because you mentioned, like, you really hope it's a mental shock, I guess you could say, that makes him be better, right?
It's kind of a reset.
Reset. There you go. I mean, a mental reset that makes him so much better in the playoffs. If he has a mental reset and it only makes him worse, then oh boy, that's like the whiteout in Winnipeg, that might rattle him. Who knows?
That's the scenario that you guys raise your eyes at when I say he's the goalie next year. Where
money wise, I mean, that's probably a whole nother topic. I mean, I don't exactly see how they dig out of it, but unless he has a very good playoffs, I think they intend to move on from him. But I understand that's probably more of a topic for later. But I just wanted to touch on something real quick that Evan said about Annunen. Yeah. I do believe that the belief in him is because he's homegrown, he's young. There's always the potential. People believe that he's a future starter in the NHL. It's the unknown. It's the ceiling, the upside. I think that's also part of why people are like, oh, well, just play Annunen and see what happens, because what if he surprises? What if he has a great performance? Then maybe you've solved all your problems. And I'm not quite down that road myself, but there's more hype about it than if it was Michael Hutchinson or James Reimer or someone. Like, of course, Francouz was a known commodity and this and that, but people always said about him, like, he almost would have the reins and then he would not win the next game. Like, he almost had it and then he lost it. So, like, as much as people adore Francouz, I think that's a little bit of kind of like revisionist history.
No, you're right. You're right.
They weren't ready for him to really take it over. And so I think that's why it's so tough to kind of sort out this Annunen thing, because a lot of it, I think, is the hope that this is like kind of like a little budding miracle that we have here. And, it's just so hard to know. Like, I still don't think the Avs take him seriously. It's not even about his ability. It's their belief in that, what is this guy really going to do? Like, I don't even think he's the backup next year. Like, I think they fully intend to replace Georgiev and find a more NHL veteran backup, and then he can be the third goalie. So, I mean, there's a huge range of outcome here, from, like, he's going to steal and win this cup for us to, like, he might even be in the AHL next year.
It's a big range for sure. And if I could touch on this really quickly, I forgot about the whole leash that Bednar has for Georgiev. It is definitely getting shorter. If you watch his post-game press conference on Sunday after the Vegas game, that's the most, I think, for lack of a better term, frustrated I've seen him be with the goaltending.
But he also said he was good.
I know. That's the thing, too, is like, he was good, but you need a save, right? And give him credit. He was good for the first 40 minutes. But then after that, he wasn't. He kind of crapped the bed. So it's a really interesting dynamic that you have to work with. And again, this is why we're writers, and this is why we are not part of the front office or staff of a hockey team.
I can consult, though. Hit me up.
Well, speaking of you consulting, Jackie, Scott Wilson asks, wouldn't we lose Annunen to waivers next year?
Yes, and that is true that he's well, it's true that he's waiver exempt, or not waiver exempt anymore. But this is also why they signed him to a 2-year deal. It makes it harder to get picked up,
right?
Because then the other team would be on the hook for 2 years. So it is a balance, but a lot of teams, their goalies / backups get waived. It just happens every year. That's why they were talking about changing the rule that, like, every team might be able to get a third goalie kind of free on the roster. But I don't know if that's actually going to happen next year. So it definitely is a concern, but I just think it's just one that they're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, we saw like around training camp when the Avs were thinking about who they might pick up on waivers. There were so many good goalies that, teams consider their third goalie that became available, and the Avs passed on because they made just a little bit too much money or they had too long of a contract. They went with Prosvetov, and obviously we saw how that worked out. But there's always goalies on waivers that seem good but don't quite fit financially.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned earlier, kind of as my segue into the goalie segment, was it felt like the Avalanche didn't really go necessarily all in terms of the netminder position, that they felt they could find that elsewhere. So I guess let's talk about our roundtable, which, Jackie, you wrote, introduced with Evan, myself, and Ezra also participating, where you kind of just posed some questions ahead of the playoffs. And your first question, which I'll let you respond to your own question, was, is this postseason truly cup or bust? And what does that even mean? Go ahead.
So for me, I've always not liked that terminology. I also hate that they're using all in. Like, I'm sorry, but what does bust mean? Like, for me, for it to not just be like just some cute little tagline, what is bust? Like, is this the last go at it? No, like, no one's going to agree with that. Is it bust because of their finances, that this is the best the roster is going to be for the rest of the window? I guess it's possible. We hope not, but I think that remains to be seen. So, like, what does that even mean? I know it means that they prioritize the short term. They used assets, they made moves, they added players, and they believe that this is the best version of this year's Avs. So I get that, but what do they really need to do? I guess people always say, they need to make the Cup Finals or at least the Western Conference Final. Is that true? And if they fall short of that, then what? Like,
Bust.
What is bust? Does anyone get fired? Does a big name get traded? Nothing. It's just try again next year. Like, what is bust to me?
When
Like,
I think of that,
what is truly the expectation and the consequence?
When I think of that term, I think of blackjack. And I think of it in the sense of somebody taking a hand and saying, I need a 21 and I don't care if I already have a 17. They're risking it to get the biscuit. They're hoping for that 4 to come through, knowing that the 17 they already have is good enough, but not quite good enough to beat the dealer every time. And as we know, the Stanley Cup is a damn hard trophy to win. And I think you hear it in how Chris McFarland talked in our intro, which is he's even said he's pushing all the chips to the center of the table. I think
but he didn't. Here's the thing in poker, when you're all in, you either win or you're done. You walk away from the table, you're done. You're over. You get in your car and you go home. You still even have it. So that's what all in means to me.
The same is true in hockey in the Stanley Cup. You either are the one team at the very end that hoists the cup, or you go home having made all those decisions, gotten rid of all of those assets, to make a push for something that you didn't realize. And I think that it's literally the bust is anything other than the cup. And I mentioned in my answer that, in my opinion, that every great dynasty has that sort of as their mantra in some form, that it's a commitment to excellence for the Oakland Raiders. There's these different mantras that all kind of line up with win or go home. And I know what you mean, Jackie, that it's kind of like vague and kind of like sports romance, but it's so true when you're talking about getting rid of somebody like Bowen Byram to get someone like Casey Middlestat to play your second line center. That's a risk. That's putting at least the most of your chips in the center of the table. But I'll let Ezra or Evan react to the cup or bust question and what it means to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what you're saying is the organizational perspective. I think Jackie's talking about the organizational perspective, and Adrian, you're kind of talking about the locker room perspective. And I think they are two different things, where the organization can't really put all their chips in the middle because there's next year to think about and the year down the line. And the coach can't think about those years because there's only right now for this team. So, or like the locker room can't, the coach, not necessarily the coach. And I took this question as more of like, as a critic of the team, which is essentially what we are. We're hockey critics. As a fan or as a writer, like, is cup or bust fair? I don't think so, because there's so many good teams and there's so much randomness in hockey that, like, I'm not going to be disappointed in this team if it doesn't win the cup. I want it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'd love to be in the locker room and say that's all that matters, but I'm not in the locker room. I'm not in the front office. I'm somewhere else. And where I am, I'm seeing a team that has to show me that they are on track to win every year, or on track to win in this window still, for me to be satisfied. And what that means is you can't get bounced in the first round again. You can't look like you're not competitive against some of whatever team goes on to win. And frankly, with the way Nathan McKinnon's played, you kind of have to make at least the conference final for me to feel okay about the season. So yeah, that's just kind of overall my take. But I get where both of you are coming from. It's just from my perspective, sitting at home on the couch, I'm not going to be upset if they don't win the cup, but I am going to be upset if they don't look like they should have won the cup. And
that's also what I'm getting at is that. It's like if we do believe it's cup or bust, there has to be an expectation. Like, if it's not, I think literally you have to win the cup or the season's a failure. But we just spent however many minutes talking about goaltending. They didn't trade for one, so technically they weren't all in. So
that might have been a part of the bust from going all in years past, which is, and having a guy like Landeskog on LTIR and yada yada, and kind of being in a cap crunch from solidifying some of the people from winning the cup. You sort of were eating some of the bust from last year still. I think into this season, and I think what we lost from going cup or bust last year, which I'm not over here saying that like you should throw caution to the wind and trade all your assets anytime you're close. I do think that that's true to an extent, but not all the way. Like, you can't go all the way down that road, like Ezra mentioned, from the front office standpoint. And I think they had to make a conscientious decision between, are we going to fix 2C or are we going to solidify our goaltending situation? And I think that they saw the market and how everything was settling this season, and they knew and had to decide and choose, well, we'll probably get a better player if we go after our 2C than we will, for a better price than we will going after a goalie who we think will be good enough to actually fulfill what we're looking for. He's going to be at a higher price tag, at least a value basis, and kind of turn our contract structure and our cap structure kind of on its head. So I think it's a bigger commitment to go after like a solidified number one goalie, or even a backup veteran to an extent, maybe not as 2C, but if there isn't a guy on the market that really fits that backup veteran that you're looking for, there's no point in doing it just for doing its sake. And I think that's why they came to Casey Middlestat, was that he wasn't just doing it for doing its sake. They saw him as somebody who could truly be the Avalanche 2C into the next few years and beyond. So
well, they're going to have to make a huge monetary commitment to that. See,
which tells me everything about that, which to me, they knew that going after him. So the commitment was made. You know what I mean? Like you mentioned, they made a financial commitment upon trading for him too. So I'm confident in their confidence in making the right decision. Although I agree with you, it comes at a cost when you make these moves.
I just wouldn't have done it at getting the only guy that was available now and at the timing of cleaning up the Ryan Johansson mess. To me, I think that put them in an unfavorable position. Yeah. And I know this is going to bear out for years to come, but I disagree that was the smartest move to make at this time, but we'll see.
Okay. He was my off-season target too. I love it. I'm sitting here like, show me his money. I want to see this. Back up the truck for him. This is gonna be great.
Yeah, it's gonna be great when Avs fans realize how much it's gonna cost, because I don't think they do.
$6 million. Let's do it.
Oh, more than that.
I'm optimistic.
Evan, you tell me your thoughts to the Cup or bust.
Yeah, I'll keep my answer short and sweet, because all of it has actually kind of been touched on already. And I said it in an earlier episode too, of like, if the Avs trade a big name roster player for somebody else, that would be a sign of at least moving most of their chips in. And they did that with Byram and Middlestat. So I think that kind of signals it well. But I did touch on it then, of like, I am a little bit concerned about the recent stretch that the Avs have been on, right? Can they really?
You wanted 3 points from him in your bold prediction.
Don't remind me.
Yeah.
This current run that they're on is a little bit concerning, of like, can they really make that run, right? Can they really do that? So I think of like expectation wise, like, honestly, at this point, I'm second round. Like, as sad as that is to say, I just hope they make the second round. Just because of the recent stretch of form. I don't know. Regardless, you get what I'm trying to say. Of like, English, it's just been hard. Really tough. I know. Yes, English is hard. So I mean, like, what does it mean though? I think that is exactly what it means. Like, if you win the Stanley Cup, great, you've accomplished your goal. But if you don't, you've failed it. And the Avs have been Cup contenders. They've been one of the favorites for the last 3-4 years. Yeah. So I think it's understandable and reasonable to have that expectation. Pulling that off is a much harder story to come by, for sure, 100%. So I understand that, and Ezra, you make a great point about like the front office versus locker room organizational thinking of what is truly Cup or bust. And really, you have to kind of consider it all together. You have to take a step back from both of those and see, like, what does it mean for the entire team, not just the ones that put on the ice, but the ones that they have in the offices, the ones who sit in Stan Kroenke's suite every night watching the games, right? Like, that's just how it is. So it is going to be really interesting, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of discussions about this later on once the season is over, about was this season really true or false in terms of Cup or bust.
Yeah. Well, Scott Wilson says Cup or bust could mean moving out guys like Manson and Gorgiev, which I think Jackie
like next year.
Yeah. Maybe
if they were gone
I mean, I know because next year will be cup or bust again.
Yeah.
Unbelievably. Hey, it's cup or bust. Are we going to have all in as the slogan again?
I mean, we found a way. We might as well go all in. So,
All for one and one for all.
Just real quickly, just to answer the question, I guess, to me, the Manson thing is about, do they want to keep Walker? I think, to me, that the decision hinges on that. Georgiev, we talked a tiny bit before. I think it's going to really depend on his performance this playoffs, but I think ideally they'd want to make a change. I don't really know how they do because A, you have to find someone to take him, and B, they like cheap goalies. So how many of those are around that are going to fit the bill? So to me, that sounds a little impossible, but we'll see. But sure, those are going to be big decisions this summer. Absolutely. For the next cup or bust.
Well, I mean, call me crazy, but it will be as long as we have Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar. To me, it's called a window, like Scott said, and you got to do everything you can to at least satisfy their mindset in terms of making an effort to being a better team year in and year out. But let's move on a little bit through this roundtable rapid fire style. Evan, I'll let you give your rapid fire responses first, since we kind of skipped over you that last segment covering everything. But Nathan McKinnon, will he win the Hart? Yes or no? And why?
No, it's okay for skipping me over. And I think we can all just say it on 3. There we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Yes.
But I have reasons.
Yes, I was going to say, I'm looking at it right now. Jackie has a reason. So go over, because I literally just wrote yes, and if he doesn't, then I don't even know what to say next question. So Jackie has a whole bunch of stats, so I'll let her read out her stats.
Well, yeah, I think we all definitely are hopeful, and he's had an incredible season, and if they don't give it to him, it'd be very disappointing, even though the others are very deserving. I mean, it's been an incredible year for statistical achievements, but in a way, that means statistical achievements doesn't mean you're the MVP. Like, it's easy when one guy has it and then everybody can hang on that and say, oh, he scored 70 goals, he's the MVP no matter what. And to me, it's just silly. Like, it's an aspect of being MVP, but it's not the only thing. For me, what's most impressive,
award for that.
Yeah. Right. Sorry. There's an award for most goals. There's an award for most points.
Yeah.
There's an award for best goaltender. There's an award for best defenseman. So, but for me, why McKinnon's performance is so impressive is what he's done at 5-on-5. He has 12 more points than Kucherov at 5-on-5, and he only has 2 fewer goals than Austin Matthews at 5-on-5. So when looking at what these guys have accomplished, they are helped a lot by the power play. They're helped a lot by 4-on-4, and McKinnon even had more points at 5-on-5 than McDavid last year in McDavid's incredible historic season. McKinnon did more at 5-on-5 than him. And so I think when you're trying to look at these impressive performances, to me, that's one thing that really sticks out about McKinnon. And it's too bad he didn't get the Gretzky record. I think that would have, he needed that statistical achievement, whatever, break a record, but I still think he's going to get it because he's close enough to Kucherov. He needed to stay close. I don't think he has to finish ahead of Kucherov, but he had to stay close. I also think it helped McDavid isn't going to pass him, knock on wood. Please don't give him 8 points tomorrow if they do play, if he does play. But I think it's close enough. I think the fact that Kucherov and McDavid have already won it helps. I just feel like it's his year, and it'll be very disappointing if it isn't. But there's going to be a lot of biases, narratives, angles out there. You already have people saying, how can you not give it to Kucherov if Matthews hits 70? There's going to be a lot of people, especially up in Canada, saying, how is that not the MVP? So it's not a slam dunk. I don't think it's a slam dunk. I think it's going to be very close. I think McKinnon will win, but I think it's going to be very close.
Yeah, I agree with you on the 5-on-5 thing, especially. I think that's important to consider, especially. I mean, I don't want this to be misinterpreted as taking anything away, but we have to split hairs when it comes to deciding in this competition because, as you mentioned, these guys are all really good hockey players. And Kucherov gets a lot of empty net assists and a lot of empty net goals. And when you lead the league in 5-on-5 scoring, that's probably the best indicator of how truly good you are at the game of hockey on a consistent basis. So I think I give the nod to my dude Mac. I sure hope so, as I mentioned, because I've already committed to shaving my head live on this broadcast if Nathan McKinnon does not win the Hart Trophy. So that'll be fun for everybody except for me. But I think he's going to do it. So I think my beautiful luscious locks are in safekeeping right now inside of my Avalanche hat. But let's keep this thing moving along, as we've already hit an hour and we kind of haven't even gotten to our last segment. So let's just talk a little bit about some things around the league. I'm going to cue this up and hope to God it doesn't get us kicked off YouTube, but let's just do it anyway. We can make it really small and quiet. But here's DU celebrating their championships. As we saw this past weekend, the DU Pioneers become national champions yet again for the second time in 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. And I hope that that's a familiar tune to the hockey sphere as we head into the Stanley Cup playoffs. But let's just talk DU Pios real quick. What are your guys' reactions, and congratulations to the DU Pioneers?
Yeah, awesome stuff from the Pios. Record 10th NCAA Division I championship. Sean Behrens is a national champion yet again. It's the second time. He also won it in 2022. People were asking about Matt Davis, if the Avs can sign him immediately. That has not happened, and he couldn't play in the playoffs anyway. His diving save, one for the record books. I mean, just absolutely incredible. But back to Behrens real quick, because he did get the assist on the game-winning goal in the semifinal against I believe it was Boston College, right? He got the assist there on that win. I'd have to go back and look if he got any points in the championship game on those two goals, but I think you seriously have to, like, when's he gonna sign that ELC? Come on, you just have to slide it across the desk, like when he's studying for his computer science final next week. Just have Chris McClellan show up and be like, "Hey, I got this for you." Like, he has to, right?
There's a little concern there. Both of his teammates, Rizzo and Shy William, is that how you say his name? They both signed their ELCs, and there are some rumors out there that Behrens wants to be UFA. So, and I don't think DU's announced he's coming back for senior year yet, so maybe the clock hasn't run out. But if the Avs were really going to sign him, they could have and given him a game tomorrow. That's probably what he was hoping for. I'm just saying, if we get out of this week, it's not looking good. And if he goes back for senior year, he's not going to sign with the Avs. So it's a little bit of a concern there.
Fun.
Yeah, sorry, I hate to break it to you.
On a positive note, he did have an assist in the championship game. I was just looking that up.
Yeah, I would be so pissed, but yeah. Anyway,
I mean, they could surprise us. They could announce it now. Like I say, hold out hope for the rest of this week, but we get it next week.
Well, the crazy thing that I noticed about that game, and it reminded me of when the Avs beat Tampa when Kadri came back and scored, and Bo Byron was the only one who saw it go in, was the opposition basically challenged the game-winning goal. And so everyone kind of just stood around for a little bit. They were basically challenging for an illegal check to the head, which would have been a major ahead of the goal happening, which would have basically brought the clock back to when the major happened, wipe the goal off the board, and then give DU's opposition the power play. So I was like, what the heck? Has there been a championship game to, like, be flipped on its head like this? Obviously, they didn't call it, thankfully. It was a good goal for the DU Pioneers. So congratulations to DU, keeping the championship pedigree and hockey tradition alive out here in Colorado. And like I mentioned earlier, hopefully the Avalanche can double down on that. And then, hey, what the heck? Maybe we can have some high school teams win the national championship again from out here in Colorado and put up another cool banner or two.
They did. It was Valor. I think Valor.
Oh,
Christian.
well, what do you know?
So now
What do
just
you
the
know?
Avs have to do it.
So let's complete the trifecta, the hardest one of probably of the three. But hey, let's move on to our final segment. I know we've gone over the clock a little bit here, so thank you to the three of you for sticking with me, and to all of our viewers and listeners. If you're listening right now, thank you so much for tuning into our broadcast, excuse me. But if you're listening to our Spotify or Apple podcasts, please head on over to YouTube, like, subscribe, turn on the alerts so that you know every time we are live, and you can put a face to some of these voices. And we had Scott Wilson challenge whether or not I did in fact have hair, and yes, I do. I have lots of hair. I actually need a haircut, so maybe I should just wait. I don't know, but nonetheless, yeah. Let's talk about Andrei Kovalenko and
Nikolai.
Sorry, I just talked about his dad. Let's talk about Nikolai Kovalenko. That's hilarious. And his debut for the Colorado Eagles. And Jackie, were you in the house for that?
No, but I did watch on AHL TV.
All right, give me your breakdown then.
So it was a nice surprise. I was hoping he was going to play over the weekend. So we'll see if he's still on track to potentially play in the last Avs game tomorrow night. As far as his game, everything came in as advertised. He was able to pretty much show all aspects of his game that I've been familiar with on AHL ice. He was throwing some big hits. He was really tenacious on the puck. He's probably a little bit more skilled. Well, I guess some people think he's Kaprizov, which he's not. But when you think about, is he a bottom six player? Is he more of a grinder? But he has skill. He showed a great amount of it. He showed great chemistry with Foodie. I mean, please, please, please play them both together, because they were a ton of fun together, just even in the AHL. Just working off each other, a lot of skilled plays, kind of thinking the same thing, seeing the ice the same way. So that was really cool. I thought he fit in. He didn't look like a fish out of water. He didn't look like he had no idea what North American hockey was. I think he'd be fine to play for the Avs tomorrow. I mean, they don't even have anything to play for. So give him some decent minutes. Give him at least 10, 12, dare I say 15 minutes. Just see what this guy can do, because he does a little bit of everything. He's physical, he's smart, he's skilled, and I think he showed all of that. So it was really cool to see.
That's exciting. That's exciting to hear, because he would be a welcomed addition to Colorado's depth. Evan, did you capture or catch anything from the Kovalenko performance, and do you have anything to add to Jackie?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I only followed along on Twitter, and his first NHL point, his first North American point was a very silky assist to Jean-Luc Foodie, and that was really good. And that, I think that kind of just shows how the two played off of each other, right? Really, really exciting for sure. We should know if he'll play Thursday with the Avs, because the Eagles play later tonight as of the recording of this episode in about 2 hours. So if he's in the lineup then I doubt that he's going to play 3 games in 3 days and join the Avs. So if he's not in the lineup tonight for the Eagles, then I would expect him to be in the lineup tomorrow for the Avalanche, which I really hope is the case, because there's nothing really to play for tomorrow against Edmonton. Everything is all set and solid. So we'll see. And I know Bednar and everybody has wanted Kovalenko to play at least a game with the Avalanche before the playoffs begin. And if you do that, now is the time to do that, right? The entire management team was up there in Loveland last night as well, watching. So I'm sure they are taking plenty of notes to see what he is capable of. And I think he showed in one game that he can do it at the AHL level. They might try and give him at least one game to see if he can do it at the NHL level before really deciding if they want to throw him into the fire with the start of the playoffs coming up for the Avs. And I guess the Eagles both, technically. So We'll see.
Yeah, Ezra, what about you? You got anything to add to the Kovalenko discourse?
I completely agree with what's been said. I'll also add that Bednar was on Altitude Radio this morning and said that Kovalenko was an option for tomorrow. Not necessarily that means anything. It could just be Bednar being like, yeah, he exists. But but he is aware of his play last night, and hopefully that gives him an opportunity, because if you haven't seen the clip, anyone listening, of his assist to Foodie, go just type in Kovalenko on Twitter and sift through the like various Eastern European posts that you don't want, and you'll see it. It's great.
I love it. I love it. We got you covered over here. We'll send you in the right direction at the very least if we don't have the clip ourselves, because last time Ado threw the clips up on the broadcast, YouTube said, no, you can't do that, sir. So head on over
I'll
to X.
repost it right now, so you can just go to my.
There you go. Yeah. Go follow Ezra while you're at it. Go follow
Yeah.
Evan and Jackie while you're at it too. But let's do our very last thing, as we always do, our bold predictions real fast. I'll play the music. I'll quickly hash through what happened last week, and we'll get rolling.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
I call that bold talk.
All right, so last week we had Evan with a bold hope that Casey Middlestat would have 3 points at the end of the regular season, however, was your disclaimer. So technically, you have a game, but right as of now, you're wrong, sir.
I don't like my chances for tomorrow. I don't.
I don't even know if he's going to play. I mean, I'm wondering about who's playing tomorrow, to be honest with you. So let's keep it rolling here. Ezra, you have Jonathan Drouin to get to 60 points. As of right now, he's at 56. He needed to be on a 2-point pace with 3 games to go. 2-point pace with 3 games to go. And he did so on the first game, and then hasn't done so in the last 2. Yeah, so it's gonna have to be a 4-point night and a 3-point night for 4-point night for Drew and a 3-point night for Casey Middlestat tomorrow. If they
McKinnon sits, that's your top line. It could happen.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I said that Kovalenko would play against Vegas. That was obviously not true. And Jackie, you were close, I believe. You said 2 power play goals from Cale Makar. I don't know the power play distinctions. I'm pretty sure one of them was a power play point, but he had a goal and an assist in the game where they scored between now and our last episode. So he was close. He's kind of coming on a little bit. He might be my X factor. We talk about a reframe for Georgiev, and we talk about Cale Makar having a down year where he's a Norris finalist probably. So I think like he has something to prove in a weird way right now, and no better proving ground than the playoffs, especially for a proven playoff performer. But let's get into this week's bold predictions. And folks, if you don't know, we do this every week. If you have a bold prediction of your own, just write down your bold prediction into your X account, put hashtag bold predictions, and tag us at all caps MHH_lab, and we will read it live on the show and give you a little bit of reaction. And of course, if you're correct, we will give you the beloved ding. And that's how this thing goes. So, Evan, let's get your bold prediction.
Yeah, I'll keep mine short and sweet. I was going between 2 players, but one of them seems really obvious, so I'm going to go with this other one instead. I'm going to say Jonathan Drouin opens the scoring in the playoffs for the Avalanche with a goal.
I love it. Absolutely love it.
It was between him or McKinnon. McKinnon seemed kind of easy, so I'm just going to go with Drouin instead.
All right. Joe Drouin starts us off in the playoffs with a goal. Ezra, what you got for me?
I'm going to go real bold. Colorado wins games 1 and 2.
I like it. That is bold at this point, I guess.
Yeah.
I think 18,000 plus people would love that going into game 3 at home. I think myself included.
Yeah, they didn't lose game 3, of course, but yeah.
don't keep that into existence.
That's next week. That's next week.
Ezra.
Oh, dang it. That's like, it reminds me of Evan's shutout predictions. So let's make sure we label any shutout predictions today. Jackie, what do you got for me this week?
Okay, well, I'm still on game 82, so I'm going to say Kovalenko plays tomorrow, but that's a little too easy. So I'm going to say that Nichushkin will sit out. He's going to be one of the ones getting rest. I think McKinnon's going to play. Let's be honest. He needs more points. And he's also going for the franchise record, which I think he's 1 point away from.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's definitely playing.
Fairly confident he's going to play. We'll see about the rest. But I think someone that probably could use a little bit more rest is Nichushkin. So that's going to be my guess. So I'm calling it a 2-parter, that Russian for Russian here. So
I like it.
Kovalenko plays for Nichushkin. Not
I love
necessarily
it.
in his lineup spot, but we'll see.
I love that. That'd be great.
That'd
What a
be
great
fun.
hey, let's go see it, Kovalenko. Play with Middlestat. I'd love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's find out. That's a good moment to just see how things kind of work. Bednar can play around with it. I love it. So we got Jonathan Drouin with a first goal to start off the playoffs from Evan. We got Alex to win both game 1 and game 2 from Ezra. And we got Jackie to say Kovalenko plays, but also Nichushkin will take his rest in game 82 against the Edmonton Oilers. And I will make my bold prediction goalie related because, man, are we desperate for a bold hope goalie related. I will say that our boy Georgiev gets a shutout in the final game if he starts. If he doesn't start, Annunen will have a 1-goal performance.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. If Connor McDavid's out tomorrow, I like it.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Who knows who they're going to start? Because I don't know. You might just shut down Georgiev for the remainder of the
I did see
season.
Scott Wilson in our comments say that if the Oilers call up Jack Campbell, that Ezra and I have a chance with our last week's bold predictions. So do it, Edmonton. Do it.
Yeah. It's worth paying him a huge NHL game check for one game. It's worth it.
Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning in to our broadcast of the Mile High Hockey Lab. This is our 59th episode and our first playoff edition of the 23-24 season for the Colorado Avalanche. If you enjoyed this broadcast, please head on over to Apple Podcasts, Amazon, as well as Spotify podcasts. You'll find our entire catalog there. We've been following this Colorado Avalanche team along the way since pretty much all of last season and this season. So we have kind of a cool catalog and diatribe of all things Colorado Avalanche for the last time period. So have some fun, do the deep dive into that. Be sure to give us a follow on X at Mile High Hockey and follow the podcast itself at all caps MHH_lab. Signing off from the Mile High Hockey Lab, I'm Adrian Hernandez here with Ezra Parter, Jackie K, and Evan Liu. Thank you, folks, so much for listening. You have a wonderful evening, and go Colorado Avalanche.
Thank you for tuning into the Mile High Hockey Lab.